flashing blue lights painting my living room walls like a nightmare disco. I rushed to the window and froze. Two police cruisers, an FBI van, and our HOA president pointing at my house like I was some kind of fugitive. My heart hammered as I called for my wife. "What the hell did you do?" But when she saw those lights, she didn't look scared. She looked satisfied. Have you ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA president? Share your stories below, because trust me, you haven't seen anything like what happened next. It all started with an argument over rose colors, but who knew that would lead to federal investigations and my quiet suburban life becoming complete chaos? We moved to Maple Grove just 2 months ago, and honestly, I thought we had found paradise. My little woodworking shop in the garage was already getting its first orders from locals, who appreciated carefully planning where to plant roses and herbs with the precision of someone who actually knew what they were doing. I often saw her sitting in the garden with her laptop open, typing long emails and frowning at the screen like she was solving complex problems. Sometimes I would peek over her shoulder and see weird phrases like compliance violation, enforcement standards, federal oversight. When I asked what she was working on, Emily would just smile and say she was answering work emails. "Some of these communities think they can make up their own rules," she would say with this little laugh that I never really understood. Honest craftsmanship. I make custom furniture, nothing fancy, just solid work with my hands that puts food on the table and keeps me happy. The neighborhood seemed perfect, tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, the kind of place where kids actually ride bikes without parents panicking. I even got excited about having actual neighbors again after living in that cramped apartment downtown for 3 years. I mean, what could go wrong in suburbia, right? Emily spent most of her time designing our backyard garden. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to that laugh. I never thought much about it, to be honest. Emily worked from home doing something with community management, which sounded boring but paid well enough that I did not need to stress about my workshop income. She was always quiet about the details, but I figured that was just her personality. My wife has always been the type to keep work and personal life completely separate. She would close her laptop when I walked into the room, not in a suspicious way, just in a "I am done with work for the day" way. I respected that boundary because, honestly, who wants to hear about spreadsheets and community guidelines over dinner? Anyway, boy, was I naive about what those spreadsheets actually contained. Everything changed on a Friday afternoon when Patricia Wellington showed up at our door with a stack of papers and the kind of forced smile that immediately puts you on edge. She introduced herself as the community leader and handed Emily what she called a special invitation to attend Tuesday's HOA meeting. Patricia was exactly what you would picture when someone says HOA president, perfectly styled blonde hair, designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and this way of speaking that made every sentence sound like a royal decree. "I hope you understand how important participation is," Patricia said, looking Emily up and down like she was evaluating a potential threat. "We have standards that must be respected absolutely." I remember thinking seriously, standards for what? Breathing. Emily politely took the letter, glanced through it with the same expression she used when reading grocery store circulars, and nodded. "Thank you," she said calmly. "I will consider it." Patricia's smile flickered for just a second, and I caught this flash of something in her eyes that made my stomach tighten. Consider it. This is a mandatory obligation, not a choice. Emily stayed perfectly calm, which honestly impressed me because Patricia's tone was already getting under my skin. "I understand," Emily replied. "Have a good day." After Patricia left, Emily read the invitation more carefully, and I watched her eyebrows raise slightly as she went through all the big words and warnings about community compliance and mandatory participation in governance. The whole thing read like a legal document for joining a cult. Right then, Emily's phone rang, and she looked at the screen with an expression I had never seen before, something between resignation and mild annoyance. "I need to take this," she told me. "A community in Colorado is having problems." I overheard her say things like, "You need to follow the fair housing laws we established," and "No, you cannot ban pets based on breed discrimination, that is federal law." When she hung up, I was curious enough to ask who that was, but Emily was already typing on her laptop, responding to emails with a signature that said Emily Williams, Community Compliance Division. She looked at me and said, "Just work stuff, honey, community management, you know." I saw her close several browser tabs that said things like HUD, guidelines, and federal standards, but honestly, I was more focused on figuring out what to make for dinner. I mean, how exciting could community management really be? Emily closed her laptop, looked at the HOA invitation, sitting on the table, and smiled in a way I had never seen before, like she knew something the rest of us did not. Her smile didn't match her eyes, like she was holding back a secret. This little HOA is not big enough to cause me problems. Something in her voice made me wonder if my wife was hiding something bigger than I realized, but I shrugged it off. How big could neighborhood drama really get? Spoiler alert, way bigger than I ever imagined. Tuesday came around, and Emily decided not to attend the HOA meeting, which seemed reasonable to me since we had only lived there for 2 months. She was watering plants in the garden when Patricia called our house phone. "Mrs. Williams." "This isn't optional," Patricia snapped, her voice sharp enough to slice through the quiet garden air. "I am busy right now," Emily replied without even looking up from her tomato plants. "If there is something important, you can email me. Who do you think you are?" "These are community rules," Patricia's voice cracked with frustration, and I watched my wife's face as something dangerous flickered behind her calm expression. Emily hung up without another word, and I had this weird feeling that Patricia had just made a mistake she did not even know about yet. Looking back, that was the moment Patricia sealed her own fate, and she had no idea what kind of federal machinery she had just set in motion. That evening, Emily sent a response email to Patricia, and I happened to glance over her shoulder as she typed. The signature line read, "Emily Williams, Senior Compliance Officer, Community Oversight Division, Department of Housing and Urban Development." I stared at that signature for several seconds, trying to process what I was seeing and wondering when my wife had started working for the government. The next morning, we received not one, but 2 violation notices slipped under our door like we were being served legal papers. The first one claimed our rose color did not match the community color palette and must be changed to soft pastels. The second notice said our garden tool storage bin was positioned 3 inches wrong, according to some regulation I had never heard of. Total fines, $800 for flowers being the wrong shade of pink, and a storage bin being slightly out of place. I felt my blood pressure spike reading these ridiculous notices, because apparently flower colors were a national security threat now, in Patricia's twisted little kingdom. Emily read each notice and just nodded slightly, like she was checking items off a shopping list, then grabbed a yellow legal pad and started jotting quick notes in what looked like legal shorthand. "Interesting approach," she said, with this clinical tone that made me look at her sideways. She is quite creative at twisting the rules. I wanted to ask what she meant by that, but Emily was already analyzing the violations like she was building some kind of case file. The whole situation felt surreal, like we had accidentally moved into some alternate reality where HOA presidents had nothing better to do than measure storage bin placement with rulers and fine people for having roses that were too vibrant. Curious about the legitimacy of these fines, I looked up our HOA documents online and found copies of other community letters from similar associations. What I discovered made my stomach drop. Patricia's language was usually aggressive compared to normal HOA templates, filled with legal threats and intimidation tactics that seemed designed to scare residents into compliance. Most HOA letters use standard polite language about community guidelines, but Patricia's communications read like legal warfare declarations. I showed Emily what I had found, and she studied the documents with the focused intensity of someone who knew exactly what she was looking at, which should have been my second major clue about her real expertise. Later that day, Patricia posted photos of our house in the neighborhood online group with a comment that made my jaw drop. Some new residents seem to not understand the Maple Grove community spirit, she wrote. "We hope they will learn to respect what we have built here." The post got dozens of supportive reactions and comments backing Patricia, with neighbors I had never met talking about property values and community standards like we were some kind of threat to civilization. I felt this weird mix of anger and embarrassment reading through all those comments from people who knew nothing about us except that we had the wrong color roses. After seeing Patricia's social media attack, I suggested to Emily that maybe we should just apologize and try to smooth things over with the neighbors. Emily gave me this chilling half smile that made the hair on my arm stand up and said quietly, "Patricia should pray I stay quiet." The way she said it made me realize that my wife was not some pushover who could be bullied into submission, but someone who was choosing restraint for reasons I did not understand. Emily responded in the group with what seemed like a gentle but weirdly sharp professional tone. "Thank you, Mrs. Wellington, for your concern. I have reviewed Maple Grove's rules and found several clauses that do not align with current federal guidelines. Perhaps we should schedule a discussion about compliance issues." A few group members started getting curious about the federal guidelines. Emily mentioned asking questions about her background that Patricia clearly did not want to answer. Patricia deleted Emily's comment within an hour and wrote a new post that said, "We do not need outside specialists interfering with our community." The way she capitalized "our" made it sound like she owned the entire neighborhood personally. I watched Emily read Patricia's response and get this look on her face that I had never seen before, like someone who had been holding back but was starting to get tired of playing nice with people who did not understand the rules of the game they were playing. The next day I went to check our mail and overheard two neighbors whispering by the mailbox about the new people who think they're special and don't follow community rules. They stopped talking when they saw me, but the damage was done. I could feel the social isolation building around us like a wall. These people had decided we were the problem, based on Patricia's word alone, without ever bothering to introduce themselves or learn anything about us. Walking back to our house, I felt paranoid and unwelcome in what was supposed to be our new community, while Emily seemed completely unbothered by the growing hostility surrounding us. Emily grabbed her yellow pad again and started writing what looked like detailed observations about Patricia's behavior patterns, community response mechanisms, and something she labeled escalation protocols. "One more step," she said quietly while making her notes, "and I will pull a lever they cannot even imagine exists." The way she said it made my stomach drop, and I realized I had no idea what Emily was actually capable of when pushed too far. That should have been my third major clue that I was living with someone much more powerful than I realized, and that Patricia was about to find out exactly what happens when you pick a fight with someone who writes the rules instead of just following them. Patricia started what I can only describe as a campaign of harassment that would have been impressive if it was not so completely insane. Now she had a clipboard strapped with color-coded tabs, stalking our curb like a self-appointed marshal, documenting crimes against suburban aesthetics. I would look out the window and see her standing on the sidewalk, making detailed notes about everything from our mailbox angle to the exact position of our welcome mat. The woman even brought a measuring tape one day to check whether our flower bed extended too far into what she claimed was common area, which turned out to be completely wrong according to our property survey. I mean, who has time for this level of obsessive behavior? Some neighbors started avoiding us after Patricia's social media campaign gained momentum, and honestly, that hurt more than I expected. The neighbor next door stopped saying hello when she saw us outside, and the guy across the street kept staring at us suspiciously, like we were planning to burn down the neighborhood. I started to feel paranoid every time I walked to my mailbox, wondering which neighbors were watching and judging everything we did. Emily seemed completely unbothered by the whole situation, which should have been my second clue that something was not adding up. I was getting stressed about neighborhood drama, while my wife acted like this was all just mildly entertaining background noise that did not deserve her full attention. Patricia sent emails to all neighbors complaining that we were uncooperative and threatening neighborhood property values with our rebellious attitude toward community standards. She described us as outsiders who refused to respect local traditions, which was ridiculous since we had lived there for exactly 8 weeks and our only crime was having roses that were too bright. The emails got more dramatic each day, with Patricia painting us as some kind of dangerous element that would destroy everything the community had worked to build. I could not understand how flower colors had become a threat to civilization, but apparently Patricia saw us as the first step toward complete neighborhood chaos and the collapse of property values everywhere. Then Patricia escalated to what I can only call psychological warfare by sending an anonymous tip to neighbors, claiming I was running an illegal home business out of my garage without proper permits. The letter described suspicious activity involving power tools, unknown visitors picking up packages, and possible zoning violations that could affect everyone's insurance rates. Of course, my woodworking shop was completely legal, with all proper permits filed through the city, but Patricia's anonymous letter made it sound like I was operating some kind of underground industrial operation that threatened the safety and financial well-being of the entire community. The fact that she would outright lie to turn neighbors against us showed just how far she was willing to go to maintain control. I found Emily sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, typing something on a website with the logo Federal Community Standards Board. The screen showed what looked like official government documents with lots of legal language that went way over my head. When I asked what she was working on, Emily said research without looking up. I need to understand more about the management structure of this neighborhood. Her jaw tightened as she read something on the screen, one fingertip drumming the table, like a countdown to something I could not imagine. The way she said management structure made it sound like she was analyzing a corporation instead of a bunch of houses with an overzealous HOA president who needed a hobby. Right then, Emily's laptop chimed with what looked like an encrypted email marked Urgent Federal Oversight Inquiry in the subject line. Emily's entire demeanor changed as she read the message, her professional mask slipping for just a second to reveal something that looked like grim satisfaction. "Mark," she said without taking her eyes off the screen, "can you give me a few minutes? This is work-related." I caught a glimpse of official government logos and case numbers before Emily angled the laptop away from me, but it was enough to make my stomach drop with the realization that whatever was happening here was way bigger than neighborhood drama. My wife was not just some community management specialist dealing with local politics. Emily started making phone calls that sounded increasingly official, using phrases like federal compliance review and regulatory oversight that made me wonder if my wife had been living some kind of double life for our entire marriage. During one call, I heard her say, "I am seeing patterns that suggest systematic violations of federal housing guidelines, and the financial irregularities are particularly concerning for interstate prosecution." She was taking notes in what looked like some kind of official format, documenting everything Patricia had done with the precision of someone who knew exactly what evidence would be needed for legal proceedings. When I asked who she was talking to, Emily just said, "Work colleagues who specialize in community management issues." Fed up with the escalating harassment, I decided to confront Patricia directly when I saw her measuring our driveway with her tape measure for the third time that week. "Mrs. Wellington," I said as politely as possible, "is there something specific you're looking for? Maybe we can resolve this without all the measuring and documentation." Patricia looked up at me with eyes that held something cold and calculating, like she was evaluating whether I was worth her time to destroy completely. "You'll regret thinking the law works the way you imagine," she said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Some people learn the hard way that community standards supersede individual preferences, and frankly, you have no idea what kind of influence I actually have in this area." The final straw came when Patricia organized what she called a neighborhood watch meeting to discuss the problem residents who were disrupting community harmony. She did not mention us by name, but everyone knew exactly who she was talking about when she described new residents who refused to follow established protocols and seemed to think federal guidelines supersede community standards. I felt humiliated knowing our neighbors were sitting in someone's living room, discussing how to deal with us like we were a pest control problem that needed to be solved before we infected the entire community with our dangerous ideas about personal property rights and flower color freedom. Emily finished whatever she was working on and carefully saved her files to what looked like an encrypted government server before shutting down her laptop with deliberate precision. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, like she was weighing options in her head that I could not even imagine, calculating costs and benefits of actions that remained completely mysterious to me. "I hope they wouldn't make me do this," she said with quiet intensity that made my hands shake, but now I almost want them to. The way she said it made me realize that whatever Emily was capable of, Patricia had no idea what she was about to face, and neither did I. But something told me the quiet phase of this conflict was about to end in ways none of us were prepared for. Blue lights bounced off our living room walls like a nightclub from hell. 2 police cruisers idled outside, and my heart did a full sprint as I watched Emily calmly set down her coffee, like flashing police lights were just another Friday evening entertainment. The following Friday, Emily had refused to attend the second HOA meeting, and I honestly thought Patricia was going to have some kind of breakdown over it. The woman had been building up to this moment for weeks, sending increasingly frantic emails about mandatory participation and community obligations that made it sound like skipping an HOA meeting was equivalent to treason. At 8 p.m., while we were settling in for a quiet evening, those police cars showed up with their lights flashing, like we were running some kind of criminal operation out of our garage workshop. I thought my wife was about to get arrested over rose bushes, which would have been the most ridiculous thing that ever happened in my entire life. My heart was pounding as I watched Patricia through the window, and instead of pointing at our house with her usual folder, she paced in tight circles near the curb, clutching a binder so thick it looked ready to explode with tabs and accusations. The woman had brought what appeared to be a complete dossier of our supposed crimes against community standards, including printed photos of our violations and what looked like a timeline of our rebellious behavior since moving to the neighborhood. She had seriously turned documenting our flower colors into what looked like a federal investigation, complete with evidence markers and cross-referenced documentation that would have impressed a forensics team. Patricia was telling the police that she had warned us multiple times about this family, and that we violated every community rule, refused to cooperate, and she suspected we were hiding something dangerous. The way she said hiding something made it sound like she thought we were running a drug operation, instead of just trying to live quietly with slightly too bright roses. She slammed her finger on a photo like it was Exhibit A in a murder trial and shouted, "This family is undermining everything we have built." The officer looked at Patricia's list of crimes, which included not attending HOA meetings, wrong flower colors, and parking position violations that apparently threatened the fabric of suburban society. I watched this unfold and thought, this is really happening. The police are actually here because we did not go to an HOA meeting, and Patricia has lost her absolute mind. The first officer, a younger guy who looked like he had seen every kind of crazy suburbia could offer, kept a professional poker face, while Patricia ranted about community order and property values. "Ma'am," he told Patricia with obvious patience, wearing thin, "this is not a police matter, this is a civil dispute." But his partner, an older cop with gray temples, studied Patricia's binder, with growing interest flipping through pages and raising his eyebrows at what looked like financial documentation mixed in with the flower photos. The older officer caught something in Patricia's paperwork that made him exchange a meaningful look with his partner, like they had stumbled onto something more serious than neighborhood drama. Patricia turned red and started arguing with both officers about community order and property values, like she was trying to convince them that flower colors were actually a public safety issue. Emily walked out like someone arriving at her own courtroom, chin-high heels clicking a verdict before she even spoke. "Hello, officers," she greeted them politely, carrying a folder of her own that materialized from somewhere like she had been preparing for this exact moment. "May I explain the situation?" Emily opened her folder and handed the first officer some documents that made his eyebrows raise immediately as he flipped through the pages. "These are preliminary findings I have done on Maple Grove HOA," Emily said in this professional tone I had never heard before. "There are some very interesting financial irregularities that I think you should see." "Wait, what? When did my wife become someone who investigated financial irregularities, and why did she have official-looking documents ready to hand to police officers, like this was all part of some predetermined plan?" Patricia's mouth dropped open as she stared at Emily's folder, and I could see her brain trying to process where Emily could have gotten official-looking documents about the HOA's finances. "Where did she get those?" Patricia demanded, but both officers were too busy reading Emily's papers to pay attention to her protests, and I watched the older cop's expression change, from mild interest to serious concern, as he studied whatever Emily had provided. Officer Emily said with the kind of authority that made everyone stop talking and listen, "I enforce the laws Patricia pretends to understand, and right now, her HOA is in violation of federal code." I stood there thinking federal code. Who was this woman, and what had she done with my gardening, obsessed wife who worried about tomato plants and weekend pancake recipes? "What the hell is going on?" I whispered to Emily, feeling like I was watching some kind of alternate reality unfold in my own driveway. Later, Emily replied without taking her eyes off the officers. "Right now, watch how justice works." The way she said it made me realize that whatever was happening here, Emily had been planning for this moment since the day Patricia first showed up at our door with her ridiculous invitation. Emily continued in that same professional tone that was starting to freak me out completely. "I monitor HOA operations nationwide, and what I am seeing here is quite concerning from a federal compliance perspective." Patricia stared at Emily like she was seeing a completely different person, which honestly was exactly how I felt watching my gardening-obsessed wife transform into some kind of federal agent right in front of my eyes. The younger officer looked skeptical about the whole situation, clearly thinking this was just another suburban dispute that had gotten out of hand. But his partner was studying Emily's documentation with the intensity of someone who recognized official government paperwork when he saw it. "Actually," Emily said with a slight smile that did not reach her eyes, "I am not just a neighbor." She handed both officers another document that made them study the papers even more carefully. And I watched the older cop's entire demeanor change as he realized he was dealing with someone who had legitimate federal authority. "This shows Mrs. Wellington has been using community funds for personal expenses," Emily explained, while Patricia started shaking like someone having a medical emergency. "Landscaping for her own house, consulting fees paid to her husband's company, and several other irregularities that violate federal guidelines for HOA financial management." I stood there completely shocked, watching my wife, who makes pancakes on weekends, talk to police like she was some kind of federal investigator who had been building a case against Patricia this entire time. The older officer studied the financial documents with growing concern, while his younger partner looked back and forth between Emily and Patricia, like he was trying to figure out which one of them was telling the truth. "Ma'am," the older officer said to Patricia after reviewing Emily's documentation, "I think we need to have a private conversation about these financial irregularities, and I would suggest you contact a lawyer immediately." As Patricia was led toward the police car, she turned back and stared at Emily with pure hatred mixed with what looked like absolute terror, like someone who had just realized they had picked a fight with the wrong person. When the officer asked Patricia to step aside for a private conversation, I realized my wife had not just won an argument, she had declared war. Emily just watched calmly as Patricia was escorted away like she was already 3 steps ahead of whatever Patricia might try next, and I realized I had no idea who I was really married to. That thought both thrilled and terrified me in ways I could not even begin to process. Because how do you react when you discover your spouse is apparently some kind of government super agent who has been hiding in plain sight for your entire marriage? And the neighborhood tyrant you thought was just annoying has actually been committing federal crimes that your wife has been documenting the entire time. Emily opened the office door like peeling back a secret life. Degrees, awards, photos with people I had only ever seen on news broadcasts stared back at me from every wall. There was a diploma from Georgetown Law School that I had somehow never noticed, and several awards from the Department of Housing and Urban Development that made my head spin trying to understand what I was looking at. I stared at these credentials and thought, how did I live with someone for 10 years and never notice they had a law degree from Georgetown? Was I really that oblivious, or had Emily been deliberately hiding the most important parts of her professional life from me this entire time? "Why does this say Department of Housing Enforcement?" I asked, pointing at a certificate that looked official enough to hang in a federal courthouse. Emily pulled open a desk drawer and placed a federal ID badge on the surface between us, her eyes never leaving mine. "You were not supposed to know," she said quietly. "Until now." My pulse spiked so hard it thudded in my teeth as I picked up the badge and read, "Senior Federal Compliance Officer Emily Williams, authorized to investigate housing violations across all 50 states. Congress, you? How the hell did I never know this?" I demanded, feeling like I was meeting a stranger wearing my wife's face. Emily's phone started ringing before she could answer fully, and she glanced at the screen with an expression that made every nerve in my body go electric. "FBI Financial Crimes Division," she said, glancing at me apologetically. "I have to take this. It is about Patricia." She put the call on speaker while I tried to process the fact that my wife was apparently on a first-name basis with federal agents who called her at home about our neighborhood drama. "Emily, this connects Arizona and Florida," the agent said without any pleasantries. "You just gave us the missing link we have been hunting for months. Warrants are being signed now. Movement starts before dawn." Emily nodded like she was coordinating a military operation instead of discussing our HOA president's flower color obsession. "Agent Martinez, can you run the background check on Patricia Wellington? I suspect she is connected to other HOAs because I am seeing similar patterns across state lines." The FBI agent replied that they were already tracking a multi-state HOA embezzlement ring, and Emily's intel might be the final piece they needed to solve a case that had been going on for months. "Patricia Wellington has been moving around using the same methods at different communities," Emily explained, while I tried to remember how to breathe normally. "I think she is part of something much bigger than just our neighborhood drama." Back when HOAs were chaos, Congress called me, Emily said, as I tried to wrap my brain around the revelation that my wife was apparently some kind of legal genius who had been hiding her credentials for our entire marriage. I wrote the rules they all play by now. Every HOA rule in America has to follow the framework I created, and when communities violate federal guidelines, I investigate. When there is corruption or illegal practices, I shut them down. For how long, I asked, feeling like I was in some kind of alternate reality where my quiet wife who worried about rose colors was actually a federal agent who could destroy corrupt HOAs across the entire country. 12 years, Emily replied, her voice soft, but every word felt like steel pulled taut. I have handled thousands of cases like Patricia, and honestly, most of them are way worse than what we are dealing with here. Some HOA presidents steal millions of dollars. Some entire boards work together to scam residents out of their life savings. I started remembering things that should have been obvious red flags, like the time Emily had taken that sudden business trip to Nevada and came back talking about systematic violations and enforcement protocols, or the encrypted emails she received at weird hours, always marked urgent with government logos I had glimpsed but never questioned. Those mysterious phone calls about communities in Colorado and Arizona suddenly made sense. I was completely overwhelmed trying to process the fact that the woman I had lived with for 10 years, who made me coffee every morning and worried about whether our garden plants were getting enough water, was working with the FBI to catch criminals who operated across multiple states. All those times I thought Emily was being vague about work emails and community management, she had actually been building federal cases against corrupt housing officials who preyed on homeowners. The encrypted phone calls, the mysterious business trips, the legal language I kept overhearing it all suddenly made sense in a way that made me question everything I thought I knew about the person I had married. Emily's phone rang again, and the FBI agent's voice filled the room with news that made Emily's jaw clench with something between satisfaction and cold fury. "Emily, we need your full case file on Wellington because she has been running the same scam in 7 states over the past 5 years, and federal charges are being filed as we speak." I listened to my wife coordinate with the FBI about arrest warrants and evidence collection, like she had been doing this her entire life, which apparently she had. The agent continued, "Your documentation of the financial irregularities and intimidation tactics gave us everything we needed to connect Wellington to the larger network of corrupt HOA officials we have been tracking." "Who are you?" Really, I asked again, feeling like the foundation of my entire marriage had shifted beneath my feet. Emily slid the federal ID across the desk, like priming an explosive, looking at me with an expression I had never seen before, something between vulnerability and absolute steel resolve. "The person who makes sure tyrants like Patricia do not win," she said quietly. "Ever. That is who I have always been, Mark, even when I could not tell you about it." The way she said it made me realize that my wife had not just been hiding a job from me, she had been carrying the weight of protecting entire communities from people like Patricia. Emily hung up the phone and looked at me with a mixture of relief and worry that made my chest tighten with emotions I could not even name. "Mark," she said quietly, "I need you to know that this is about to get much bigger than just our neighborhood drama, and there might be retaliation attempts before Patricia is officially arrested. Are you ready for what is coming?" Her voice steadied as she spoke about federal protocols and safety measures, but underneath that professional calm, I could see something that chilled me more than the flashing lights outside. This was not over. It was just entering a bigger arena where the stakes were higher than I had ever imagined, and my wife was apparently one of the key players in a game I was only beginning to understand. By the time Patricia's all-caps email hit every inbox, the air in Maple Grove was electric. You could feel the fracture lines forming in every whispered conversation, neighbors choosing sides before they even understood what war they were joining. The subject line read, "Emergency community meeting tonight. Mandatory attendance, future of our neighborhood at stake." And the message inside painted Emily and me as dangerous outsiders trying to destroy everything the community had worked to build. Patricia was rallying residents against what she called outside interference in community affairs, apparently trying to turn our neighbors into foot soldiers for her last desperate attempt to maintain control. She had no idea that Emily's FBI contact had already begun investigating her financial records, or that federal agents were probably watching her every move while she planned her final stand. She strutted into the meeting like a general rallying troops for a lost war voice, cracking, as she promised to defend tradition at any cost. The community center felt different that night, charged with tension that made everyone speak in hushed tones and avoid direct eye contact. About 40 residents packed into folding chairs, some recording everything on their phones, like they knew they were about to witness something historic. Whispers spread through the crowd about FBI agents spotted at the local coffee shop. Earlier that day, black SUVs parked near the community entrance, and mysterious phone calls to Patricia that had left her pale and shaking. The rumor mill was working overtime, and everyone seemed to sense that this was not going to be a normal HOA meeting about landscaping budgets and pool maintenance schedules. Patricia had sent out emails describing Emily as a dangerous outsider who was trying to destroy community traditions with federal overreach and bureaucratic intimidation tactics. She painted herself as a defender of local autonomy, fighting against government interference, which would have been inspiring if she had not been stealing community funds and harassing residents who disagreed with her arbitrary rules. The woman actually convinced herself that she was some kind of freedom fighter instead of a petty criminal who had gotten caught by someone who knew exactly what to look for. She worked the crowd with the desperation of someone who knew her entire world was about to collapse, promising to protect property values and community standards from federal agents who wanted to micromanage their neighborhood flower gardens. 3 different residents had their phones already set to live stream, sensing that something major was about to unfold. Emily attended the meeting sitting quietly in the back row, while Patricia gave her speech about community unity and the importance of resisting outside agitators who did not understand local values. Emily looked completely calm, like someone watching a movie she had already seen before, while Patricia worked herself into a frenzy, describing the threat posed by federal agents who wanted to destroy everything they had built together. The irony was almost painful to watch, considering Patricia had been the one doing all the intimidating and overreaching from day one, but the crowd was eating up every word like Patricia was their last hope against some kind of government invasion. I sat next to Emily thinking, does Patricia realize she is describing herself right now? And do these neighbors understand they are about to watch their HOA president destroy herself in real time? While Patricia was explaining how federal interference would destroy everything the community had built, Emily's phone started ringing loud enough for the entire room to hear. Emily let the phone ring twice, then answered on speaker. "Yes, Agent Brooks, I am in the Maple Grove meeting now." Every head in the room snapped toward her like magnets, and you could feel the energy shift from skeptical curiosity to shocked silence as residents realized they were about to witness something none of them had expected. Mrs. Wellington is not just a problem here, Emily said into the phone, while Patricia's face drained of all color. We have discovered she is connected to an embezzlement ring in 7 states using the same methods everywhere. Florida, Arizona, Nevada. Emily continued while Patricia started shaking like someone having a medical emergency. Same methods, same timeline, same pattern of using HOA positions to steal community funds and intimidate residents who ask questions. Emily rose slowly, sliding a document across the table with surgical precision, her eyes locking on Patricia like a final checkmate. Patricia Wellington, Emily said, standing up with professional authority that made everyone stop talking and listen. The FBI has issued warrants for your financial records from 2019 to present. 3 different phones went live on Facebook the moment Emily said federal warrants have been issued for your financial records. By the time Patricia's knees buckled, Maple Grove was trending on local social media as residents shared footage of their HOA president's complete meltdown in real time. The meeting erupted in chaos as residents who had supported Patricia suddenly realized they had been defending someone who had been stealing their money for years, demanding to know where their community fund money had actually gone, while Patricia tried to maintain control by claiming everything was lies and government overreach. Patricia's face cycled through emotions like a broken traffic light, fear melting into rage, then rage collapsing into pure desperation as she scanned the room, looking for exits and clutching her folder like a lifeline. "She has been lying to us," one resident shouted, while others demanded answers about financial irregularities they had suspected but never been able to prove. Patricia tried to salvage the situation by claiming she had protected the community and maintained standards that everyone had benefited from. But nobody was listening to her anymore because Emily's evidence was too detailed and official to dismiss as neighborhood drama. I watched Patricia's supporters turn against her in real time and realized that karma sometimes works faster than you expect, especially when it has federal backing and professional documentation. As neighbors crowded Patricia with questions, Emily's phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, her jaw tightening, with an expression that made my stomach drop. "That was not the last arrest tonight," she whispered to me, while Patricia tried to escape through the crowd of angry residents who finally understood how much money had been stolen from their community fund. The way Emily said it made me realize that our neighborhood drama was just one small piece of a much larger puzzle, and Patricia's downfall was about to trigger something bigger than any of us had imagined possible. The alert hit our phones while we were still in the produce aisle, motion-detected home office window. The thumbnail image froze my blood. Patricia, with a crowbar. 2 days after the meeting, Patricia had made her last desperate move that proved she had completely lost touch with reality, trying to break into our house while we were grocery shopping, probably looking for evidence she could use against Emily, or documents she could destroy to cover her tracks. Unfortunately for Patricia, Emily had installed security cameras as soon as she realized this situation was going to escalate beyond normal neighborhood drama, which apparently was standard procedure when dealing with potentially dangerous HOA criminals. Emily snapped into command mode, barking updates to the FBI while steering us home like a SWAT driver coordinating with federal agents and local police, like she was directing some kind of tactical operation. When we arrived, the scene looked like something from a crime drama, with flashing red-blue lights bouncing off Emily's law certificates through the office window, while Patricia was caught red-handed attempting to pry open the window frame. Patricia was screaming excuses that no one believed, claiming she was checking for gas leaks and community safety violations, while neighbors gathered with their phones out recording everything. Someone actually shouted "World Star" as Patricia was handcuffed, and I realized our quiet suburban street had turned into viral content for the entire internet to witness. The woman who had terrorized our neighborhood over flower colors was led away in handcuffs while neighbors watched from their windows, finally understanding that Emily had been protecting them from someone truly dangerous who would break into homes when cornered. Patricia was arrested on the spot for attempted breaking and entering, which was added to the growing list of federal charges related to embezzlement fraud and violation of fair housing laws. The police officers treated the scene with the seriousness of a federal investigation, carefully documenting evidence while neighbors provided witness statements about Patricia's increasingly erratic behavior over the past few weeks. Within an hour, our quiet suburban street looked like the set of a police procedural with crime scene tape and federal agents taking photographs of everything Patricia had touched. Later that evening, while we were cleaning up the mess Patricia had made of our garden during her break-in attempt, Emily's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is not over." Emily read the message, her jaw tight, then deleted it without a word, leaving me with a chill that lasted long after the police cars had disappeared. 6 months later, the resolution felt like watching our lives play out in fast forward. The TV flashed headlines, "HOA crackdown sweeps 7 states." Clips of black SUVs rolling through suburban neighborhoods. Arrest footage of Patricia and 11 other corrupt officials being led away in handcuffs. And then Emily on our front porch speaking to a microphone, our blazing roses framing her in the background, like some kind of garden justice warrior. Patricia was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for embezzlement fraud and attempted breaking and entering, and the investigation revealed she had stolen over $2 million from various HOAs across 7 states. The neighbor next door brought Emily flowers that day, and a little girl from down the street asked me, "Is she famous?" They called it the Wellington Act. Emily never bragged, but I saw her name on every page of legislation that would protect millions of homeowners from the kind of corruption Patricia had built her career on. Maple Grove became a completely different community under new leadership that actually followed federal guidelines and treated residents like human beings instead of subjects in Patricia's personal kingdom. A sweet retired teacher was elected as the new HOA president, and she often asked Emily for advice about compliance issues, which Emily was happy to provide officially this time. The neighborhood actually felt like a community now, with people helping each other and meetings that were productive instead of being platforms for one person's power trips. Patricia's old house was bought by a lovely family with 3 kids who brightened up the entire street, and sometimes I see them playing in their yard and think about how different things could have been if Patricia had just minded her own business. We sat on the porch that night, watching our roses glow in the sunset like they were lit from within. For the first time, I did not see mystery in Emily's smile. I view fire purpose and something terrifyingly beautiful in the way she had fought for justice without compromising who she was. Our garden bloomed beautifully that spring, and Emily could finally tend her plants in peace without being photographed or harassed for having roses that were too bright according to arbitrary color standards. The irony was not lost on me that the woman who could shut down any HOA in America just wanted to grow flowers and make weekend pancakes without dealing with petty tyrants who thought they owned the entire neighborhood. "Do you regret not telling me sooner about your real job?" I asked Emily as we watched the sunset paint our supposedly illegal roses in shades of gold. "No," she replied thoughtfully. "I was tired of hiding who I really am. And besides, you handled it better than most people would have when they discover their spouse is basically a federal agent." Today we still live in Maple Grove, but it is a completely different place where people actually know each other's names and work together to solve problems instead of creating them. The lesson here is not about revenge or getting back at bullies, but about the fact that justice sometimes comes from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the quiet person next door is not just watering their garden, but protecting entire communities from corruption. Emily could have destroyed Patricia from day one, but she gave her every chance to do the right thing, and only acted when Patricia chose corruption and harassment over basic human decency. Sometimes the biggest bullies are actually the smallest people when faced with real consequences, and sometimes the person you married turns out to be even more amazing than you ever imagined possible. Justice had roared like thunder through our quiet neighborhood, shaking foundations and exposing truths that had been hidden for years. But peace was the soft hiss of sprinklers over roses no one dared measure again. You know, sometimes the people who seem powerless turn out to be the ones holding all the cards, and honestly, that gives me hope. If this wild ride entertained you, maybe hit that like button, or drop a comment about your own crazy neighbor stories. And hey, if you're feeling generous, that thanks button helps keep QA stories going strong. Until next time, folks.
Still thinking about what just happened? Yeah, us too. Hit subscribe and come unravel more madness with QA stories.